This is a download from the BBC of the World Football Phone-In, which is broadcast as part of the Up All Night programme on 5 Live from 2:30am to 4am on Saturday mornings. Here's the latest edition.
So let's kick off. Lots and lots of texts already. 85058 if you'd like to text our guests on football in South or North America. You can email them at upallnight@bbc.co.uk. But better still, join us live for the phone-in on 0500 909 693. Cleo in Aldershot. Good morning.
Good morning, Tim. Good morning, Dotun. Good morning, Sean.
I know what you look like now, Cleo.
Oh, you see what I you got it all good.
Cleo sent me a photograph just the other day, gentlemen, and she's just as you'd expect her to be. She's Cleo from Aldershot. Cleo, good morning. Go on.
Good morning. Next week starts the World Club Championship in Tokyo, and South America represented by Boca Juniors, who sadly won't have Riquelme because he's not managed to get through. He's been transferred from Villarreal, but the transfer didn't come through in time, so he's ineligible to play. But FIFA introduced this new goal line technology. What do the boys think of this? Where they've got a chip in the ball, and then a signal's passed to the referee in real time to see whether the ball has crossed the line. What do the boys think of this new technology?
You have anything to say about this, Sean? Because I remember it being tested in the World Under-17 Cup in Peru just over 2 years ago. I was there, and they had this ball with this magic chip and a lot of hullabaloo about it. And lo and behold, you know what happened? It didn't really work. So they've done some more experiments with it, and they're bringing it back now. And hopefully, from the technology point of view, it'll work better now than it did just over 2 years ago. On the point of Boca Juniors not being able to play field Riquelme in the World Club Championship, I think it's a huge shame. As you said, the transfer, he's just rejoined Boca. The transfer didn't go through in time. I understand entirely FIFA wanting to prevent ringers being brought in for this championship, but on the other hand, and Riquelme is part of the side. In fact, he was the most important part of the side that won the Copa Libertadores, and thus qualifying Boca Juniors for this competition back in the first 6 months of the year. So he wouldn't really be a ringer in this competition. You know, if you're looking for the side to represent South America, the side that won the Libertadores, then Riquelme is a part of that side. So unfortunately, he's fallen foul of the bureaucrats on this occasion.
And
Tim,
Sean,
as I recall, I'm sorry, Don.
Yeah, go ahead. I was going to say Sean on the ball.
Yeah, and Tim, and as I recall, in that Under-17 World Championship, FIFA, midway through that competition, actually abandoned the use of that ball. It was such a dismal failure. As I understand it from FIFA, they want the technology to be 100% accurate. And something that I've had mentioned to me in regards to this is the technology. If anyone watches tennis now, when you see on tennis where the players on the ATP and WTA tours can challenge where the ball is in or out, well, that technology is only 99-point-something% accurate, and that's not good enough for FIFA. FIFA is saying, and again, I get this through Joe Matchnick, who deals with the referees from Major League Soccer and is in general communique with FIFA, that until it's 100% accurate, they're not going to adopt this by an international standard. If there's room for any type of replay in football, I think it is on goal line decisions. I would hate to see the use of video replay on, for instance, was it a dive in the penalty area? Should a penalty kick be awarded? Is it a red card or a yellow card? Should a free kick be awarded? All of those decisions, I think, would really disrupt the flow of the game. But on goal line decisions, I can actually support that. Tim, I think you and I differ on this, Dot, and I'm not sure of your stance, but if FIFA can get this pretty close to 100% accurate, or even 99-point-something% accurate like professional tennis has right now, that's really good enough for me. It's going to be very interesting to see where this technology goes.
So we've kicked up the phone in. It's all about North and South America. If you'd like to join us on 0500 909 693. Tim Vickery's in Rio. Sean the Big Wheel is in Kansas. Andrew is in Blackheath. Good morning, sir.
Morning, Dotun. Good morning, Tim, and good morning, Sean.
Morning.
Dotun, I've got a question for Tim, but before I do, just to say it was great to have you watch our last game with us on Tuesday.
It's a pleasure. And by the way, Dave the Milkman, who, as you know, is an Addicts fan, and I know this is kind of world football phone-in material, because, let's face it, South East London is another country entirely.
Exactly.
But he says, working hard to finish in time to get to the Valley today. Hope the Jinx is too tired to come, Dotun. Just joking. I'm now known as the Jinx, am I?
Well, exactly. I was going to say, are we going to allow you to come? Because every time you come and watch them, they lose.
They don't win. You're accurate there.
But I hope you weren't put off by Mark's vociferous support and you will sit with us again one day.
Yes. I should explain to listeners that Andrew's grandson is the number one cheerleader for Charlton Athletic, as I'm sure the Sheffield United fans notice overnight. Anyway, we're talking world football,
right.
North and South America.
Tim, as you well know, Brazil have been awarded the 2014 World Cup.
Uh-huh.
You have said in the past that their grounds, I think all their big grounds, are pretty dilapidated, and what they need is at least 10 grounds, almost new, about 40,000 each. I think what they need for people in the world who don't know, perhaps they need something like a stadium in South East London called the Valley, where, for those who don't know, Charlton Athletic play. Now, they've got a new stadium, just a little bigger than that. They need 10 of those. But seriously, Tim, I know even the Americana is being sort of renovated, but who would pay for 10 stadiums of 40,000 each? Is the government pledged they would do it?
It's a very, very pertinent question because last Sunday, I don't know if you heard, Andrew, we had a stadium disaster in Brazil. One of these dilapidated stadiums, part of the stadium, the stand just gave way, and 7 fans plunged tragically to their death, a drop of some 15 metres, something like that. A stadium which was in a quite deplorable state of maintenance, and most of these stadiums are not owned by private clubs. They're owned by the state government. And when it comes to distributing the budget, maintenance just isn't sexy. It just doesn't get done. Yeah. And this is a disaster, which I think has been on the cards for some time. A very similar thing happened here in Rio at the Maracanã back in '92 when 3 people were killed. Well, if these 7 lives which have been lost so tragically, if they're not going to be lost totally in vain, then Brazil has to take take advantage of this opportunity to upgrade its stadiums for the 2014 World Cup. Now, there's a maximum of 4 brand new stadiums going to be built, a maximum of 4. The vast majority are going to be done up. They're going to be renovation jobs. I'm told by architects that these renovation jobs often cost more than building entirely from scratch. So the idea of who is going to pay for this is very, very pertinent. Now, they've announced that the majority of the resources and so on are going to come from private income. I very, very much doubt that. And I've spoken to people involved in the process, and what it seems to me will happen is that the bulk or much of the investments will be pushed towards the government. The government the Brazilian state will be expected to spend an awful lot of money to do it, which will bring all sorts of justifiable questions to the fore, such as, shouldn't we be spending this money on health and education and so on? Perfectly valid questions. Another worry about the fact that a lot of this money, I'm sure, will be government money, is the fact that, and this is, I'm not saying anything now with which people in the Brazilian government haven't themselves admitted, this means, government money means corruption. It very often means that the things are bumped up, the price is bumped up with up maybe 20% above cost, and then that surplus is distributed not only into private pockets, but a lot of it goes into political campaigns. So who's the company that gets the contract? It's the company that's contributing to political campaigns, so the politicians can get elected. So the worry about the whole process of the 2014 World Cup is whether a small group of people will benefit a lot, and the mass of society will have to pay for it through their tax money, will benefit not so much.
Andrew, thanks a lot for the call. David in El Salvador, long distance, good morning.
Morning, Dotun. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks very much. This is becoming a regular thing.
Yes, it's fabulous since I found you. It's a great show. It really is.
And I hope you've reversed the charges as normal.
Once again, yes.
Good stuff.
I've got a few questions tonight, if that's all right. I've got one for Sean, one for Tim, and one which I hope they'll both be able to shed some light on.
Okay, you're going to have to make it quick, going.
Yeah, of course. Sean, I was just wondering how the World Cup draw was received in the US, if you're happy with the route or any potential banana skins, or you think it's maybe straightforward. Who did you get, and how's that going to be seen?
All 35 eligible CONCACAF nations have entered, and you have some very, very small nations. It's funny because in the CONCACAF and in FIFA, you have nations that are not in the United Nations because they're not even independent countries. You have territories like Puerto Rico, which is part of the United States, the British Virgin Isles, Dominican Republic is a free nation, but you have then the U.S. Virgin Islands. It's so interesting to see all of these tiny little minnows of world football competing. It's a very interesting draw, I think. You have the initial stage, which is the smallest nations, the 22 smallest nations, the lowest ranked in CONCACAF. And they will compete in a two-leg aggregate series, which will take place in February, again in March. The United States was given the number 2 seed behind only Mexico. So they will be buyed into the second round, and they will face either Barbados, who's actually not a bad side. Barbados has some footballers that play in lower-tier football in England and Scotland and the Republic of Ireland, versus Dominica. That's the draw for the United States. Now, El Salvador, your nation or your adopted nation, is versus Anguilla, and that's a very, very interesting fixture there. El Salvador, and you well know, we're in the World Cup in 1982, and this is a nation that I'm sure you can speak more comfortably on this than I can about the economic hardships of the nation, but they certainly have fallen well below where they should be in football. El Salvador then would, if they advance, would face Panama, and I think it gives an interesting opportunity for El Salvador. This was a very, very good football nation, and you well know, calling from El Salvador, in the 80s, in the 90s, but a great generation of stars led by Mauricio Cienfuegos have just simply not been replaced. El Salvador, I think, economically can't afford to import footballers. For whatever reason, they're not exporting footballers. Let me ask you, in El Salvador, how is this draw being received?
Well, I think obviously you're pleased to miss, like, the States, Mexico, and Costa Rica, but you'd ideally get one of the sort of the smaller seeds. And Panama are kind of like medium. But I think at the moment, as you say, things are pretty much down. From what I can tell from the media and stuff, people are kind of thinking, well, if we're lucky on our day, if things go very well for us, maybe we'll get past Panama, but probably no further. Anguilla had us all, searching for our maps and trying to read some information about them. And I think they've played 32 international games and lost 29. So we're quite optimistic about that. But one of the things I noticed about the States is if things go according to the seedings, you may get Cuba in the group stage, in the first group stage. And I was just wondering, because I remember before the World Cup of baseball there was a little bit of a problem. Would the US players be able to go to Cuba? Would the Cuban players be able to come to the US? Or is that not really an issue anymore?
No, it's a wonderful question. Now, there would not be a concern of the Cuban footballers coming to this country. Now, that's already happened twice just in this decade alone in the Gold Cup. It's a concern for the Castro government because the last 2 times Cuba has lost a number of their top internationals, led by Mikel Galindo, who was the leading goal scorer for Chivas USA in Major League Soccer this past season. A really dynamic footballer, lost them through defection. So that's a real concern for Cuba. And that's not just in football. That happens virtually any time they come into the United States. There is always the risk, if not the reality, of defection. Now, the rub on this is in terms of the United States going into Cuba. I don't know how many of our listeners are aware of this, but there is one nation as an American citizen that I am forbidden by my government to travel to and spend money, and that's Cuba. I can go to the Sudan, I can go to North Korea, but I cannot go to Cuba. The only exceptions would be if you go on a humanitarian mission, a religious mission, or if you go as a journalist. Now, it'll be interesting to see if, for instance, if the United States does face Cuba, I will want to cover that match. Will I be given a journalistic visa? There are ways for Americans to get into Cuba. Thousands and thousands of Americans go illegally from Canada, from Mexico, from the Bahamas into Cuba every single month. If the State Department finds out that as an American you have gone to Cuba, you have spent money, you can actually be imprisoned. So there are ways to get visas, and it will be a really, really interesting situation. It's probably more pressure on the U.S. government than on the Cuban government to see what happens if the U.S. does have an away fixture in Havana.
You think it may be played in a neutral location, or even back in the States, maybe that both legs, sometimes that happens, does it?
Well, I would think that in something like this, the Cuban government, and rightly so, would demand that they play the match in Cuba.
Right.
This is a wonderful sporting nation. They were in the World Cup in 1938. They're a dominant baseball nation. But because of the policies, and Don, you remember one time I talked about this and someone got angry. They thought I was being anti-communist or anti-Castro, and I'm not. I'm just simply telling you from a sports perspective that because of the communist government, they are not allowed to have their footballers, any of their athletes leave. And that's held it back. But someone like Michael Galindo coming into Chivas USA, UC, the only way that he was able to get out of Cuba was to defect, and he is a brilliant footballer. He's someone I think could actually play in the championship in England. There's a lot of contentious feelings from the two nations, I think ridiculously so, that really go back to the 1950s and the 1960s and in the days of the Soviet Union and communism. But I'm sure that one fixture will be played in Havana and the other, knowing the United States Soccer Federation, will probably try to put it in a city like Miami that has a huge expatriate Cuban population.
David, I'm sorry to cut into you, but, the fourth official is showing me that no minutes left now at the moment, and he knows that you've come a long way as an away supporter. Can your question for Tim wait till next week?
Yes, of course.
Of course. Hopefully you can join us then. As I always reverse the charges. Thanks very much
to all of you then.
Yeah, thanks very much, David. Let's go to Tarek in London. Good morning. Hello, Tarek.
Yeah, hi.
Hi, good morning. You got a question for Tim, yeah?
Yeah, just very quick. I'm a Man United fan, and just want to know what you think of Anderson playing for Man United.
Well, I think he's an absolutely fabulous talent. I was privileged to be in Peru just over 2 years ago when he was named the best player of the World Under-17 Cup. I thought that then he was an absolutely fabulous talent. That strong left foot, difficult to knock on the ball. He's got terrific acceleration, and he can find a good pass at the end of very surging and powerful runs. The thing that's really surprised, I think, everyone in Brazil with Anderson at Manchester United is where he's playing as a kind of central midfielder. It's not a position that he ever played in Brazilian football, ever, or with Porto in Portugal. He was always an attacking midfielder, quite often wide right, the Cristiano Ronaldo role, allowing him to cut across the field onto his powerful left foot. And he said in an interview with the Brazilian press that when he first came up, very first, this is when he was like 14 or something, he did play a little bit at fullback, but he'd never, ever played in this central midfield position. So I think this is something which is forcing him to develop other aspects of his game. And it's very, very interesting to see such a technically gifted player filling this role, that when Brazil play, the Brazilian national team play, that this role is filled by the likes of Gilberto Silva or Mineiro, runners rather than artists. And Anderson really is a genuine artist. So this is very interesting for everyone in Brazilian football to see him play in that position. But I think he's a super player, a really wonderful natural talent.
How good do you think he can be, though? Do you think he can, be Fabregas?
Well, he was named as the best player in the world at under-17 level, and he was absolutely terrific. Unfortunately for him in the final, where they lost to Mexico, spearheaded by Giovanni Dos Santos now at Barcelona, he got injured right at the start of that, but he was well worth being chosen as the best player in that World Cup. And I think he is the first real potential Brazilian superstar to come into English football. With all respect for Juninho at Middlesbrough, a terrific player, a really good player, but Anderson is a potential superstar. So I think you're very, very lucky to have him. I was a little bit worried when he came. I thought it might be 1 year too early. It's a very strong squad there, and Ferguson's saying it's the strongest squad he's ever had at Man United. So they're running the risk that he might get lost a little bit, but he seems to be coming through very nicely. After all, I know Paul Scholes is out, injured, but he's keeping Michael Carrick out of the side. That's an England international, a specialist in that position, and already Anderson's getting in the team ahead of Michael Carrick. So I think the signs are very, very positive there that he's going to turn out to fulfil his potential with Man United.
Terry, thanks a lot for the call. DeMarcus Beasley, Sean, how's he rated in the USA? Asked Kev, Glasgow Rangers fan.
Oh, very, very highly. He was a phenomenal star. He debuted in Major League Soccer and top-flight football in this country with Chicago Fire when he was 17 years old. Moved to PSV Eindhoven. Very nearly went to Southampton, then went to PSV Eindhoven. His loan spell in the Premiership obviously did not work out last year, but he made a very, very smart move to Scotland. I spoke with him earlier this year when the United States faced Brazil in Chicago, and he was extremely happy to be in Scotland. I think it's a nice fix for him. Barring injury, he is first choice for the United States going into this World Cup qualification cycle.
Bears in Lancashire says, can you ask Sean to tell me where Greg Darby is now playing? He was set to join Preston North End but could not get a work permit. Also, is Preston North End actually well known in the USA?
Only if you're a football fan, that would be it. And maybe only if you're a fan of somebody who, like Brian McBride, who was at Preston on a short spell. But no, it's a club that's not well known. But then again, I'm speaking from a country where most people really have not even heard of Chelsea or Manchester United or Real Madrid. So keep that in perspective.
Sure. And Greg Darby?
That's a footballer I don't know. I don't know the location.
Okay. Let's go to Imran in Bolton. Good morning, Imran.
Good morning, Dotun. Just a question for Sean on Tim for a couple of players. All right, Sean. A Mexican player. He's at loan at Osasuna. He's an Arsenal player, Carlos Vela. Is he any good?
Yeah, this is a footballer we've talked about. Tim has actually had the chance to see him in person. I believe Tim was at the under-20s or the under-17s. But it was the under-17 World Cup, that one where Anderson and Giovanni Dos Santos came through, and he was the top scorer. And I was very, very impressed with him indeed. Left-footed, pace, gets in front of the defender, scores off his left foot, scores in the air. And since then, I haven't seen a great deal of him since, but he seems to have filled out physically since then. And his scoring record in Spain has been terrific, both in the second division, and I think he's got one or two for Osasuna as well. So a very interesting player, and a player who knows how to use his pace in the penalty area. So from the point of view of Arsenal fans, I'll be very, very happy about his association with the club. Tim, I would add that with the strength of the Mexican First Division, that there's almost a bias when it comes to international selections for the Tricolores, the Mexican side, of domestically based footballers. The money is tremendous. The standard is very, very high. It's the highest in CONCACAF. It's even, I believe, above Major League Soccer in this part of the football world. So there's almost a feeling that you should stay, especially as a young footballer, stay in Mexico, play for one of the big clubs, and you're probably going to get a selection that way. It's very easy for footballers to go abroad from Mexico and just simply fall out of the national team picture. It's almost reverse of what happens in a lot of nations. It's certainly reverse from what happens in the U.S. Oftentimes, a footballer's stature will really go up dramatically. We just talked about DeMarcus Beasley. That's certainly the case with DeMarcus Beasley. The stature goes up when you prove yourself to go out of Major League Soccer, but in Mexico, it's almost the reverse.
Christian in South Wales wants to know if the Major League Soccer will ever be able to attract the best athletes out of college instead of them going into the NFL and NBA.
Well, I think you have to back up from there, because when you're talking about in college now, there is a real thriving at the college university system for football, for soccer in the United States. The challenge now for the sport in the U.S. is to get these athletes when they're 13, 14 years old. You know, and we've talked about this on the program many times, and a lot of people, even in the U.S., find this difficult to believe, but football is the number 2 participation sport for boys under the age of 14 in the United States, second only to basketball. That's ahead of American football, ahead of baseball, ahead of ice hockey. Yet what happens is so many of these little boys and little girls, for that matter, who play football at a very young age, once they get in 14, 15, 16-year-old range, they either give up this sport or they go to a sport where they feel that they have a chance to make more money as a professional athlete, be that realistic or unrealistic. You're certainly seeing much better athletes go into football than you were a generation ago, certainly 2 generations ago. That may upset some older Americans who played football listening, but it's the truth. I look at somebody like a Landon Donovan. Landon Donovan, if he were born 15 years earlier, there's no way that he would have gone into football. And I think Landon Donovan is the best American in Major League Soccer. It's a country of 305 million people in the U.S. It's just a matter of getting the best athletes. That's why you've seen the women so successful in football from the U.S., because by and large they are getting the elite female athletes, and they're keeping them through the system into their 20s and into their 30s. And that's something that football still is struggling to do. The best athletes still predominantly in the United States choose American football, basketball, and baseball in that order.
Patrick in Willesden, thanks for waiting patiently, sir.
Good morning, Dotun. Long time no here.
Well, I'm always here. What do you mean, long time no here?
In fact, no, I haven't rang in. No,
oh, I see. I was thinking you were trying to refer to my barber or something, cropping me.
No, I was going to refer to Ronaldo, the Milan player, Brazilian. I thought that was Richard Roundtree out of Shaft the other day. 1972.
Would you say it was a bad mother?
The New York streets, the mean
Shut
streets
your
of New
mouth.
York.
So that was for Tim Vickery, not for you, Patrick.
Right.
Go on, Patrick, go on.
I
Made my night, that is.
audits. I just done my audit for this year on 5 Live, the phone-ins to America and South America in terms of phone calls. 0.5 to your friend in America and 2.5 to Tim.
Well, that's not
You must
much,
be doing something right. You must be doing something right. No,
I only got a 0.5? What's that all about?
It's calls coming to you, so that's only a joke. I'm being friendly here.
Patrick.
Difficult. I know it's difficult, but that's the way it is. Come on, it's Christmas.
It's Christmas. Fair enough.
No, seriously. This young lad that just phoned in a moment ago in relation to Anderson playing for United fan. He was the only young kid. What's he doing phoning at this time in the morning? He should be in bed with his Vic Sinex on
But
his
hey,
chest.
didn't you have your transistor radio under your pillow listening to Luxembourg Fab 208 when you were a kid? He's allowed to listen, isn't he?
No, he should be in bed with his Vic Sinex on his chest. Anyway.
Apparently, he's not as young as he sounds, so...
Well, anyway, Anderson, I've seen him live because I'm a Man U season ticket. I see him. He's been in the team now about 4 times on the spin. Apart from he was only a sub on against Bolton there on Sunday, or Saturday rather. Very good player, yes, Tim. Tim knows a lot about him, more than I do. Very industrious, skillful, quick. He's taken Carrick out of the team, quite rightly so. What does Tim... well, he's already said what he said about him. Can you give me some other information on him, please?
Well, I think you've just reinforced what I've been talking about. This is a fella who, in his life, has never played that position before, central midfielder, and you're paying tribute there to how industrious he is. He's working off the ball as well. He's closing down, and he's keeping out an England international who is a specialist in that position, Michael Carrick, and never having played in that position before. So I think that really does point towards his all-round talent, and it means, I think, as a United fan, you can also hope. You've got that thing of, if Cristiano Ronaldo goes, if he's tempted by Real Madrid or Barcelona or something like that, you can just put Anderson there because that's his position. So what a position of strength United are in. They paid a lot of money for him. It was 17 million, very, very early. It was a gamble that they took, but it seems to be a gamble that's paying off. And in a way, I'm quite jealous of you, Pat, being able to watch him every week, because what you're watching there is a real talent developing, learning about his new position, learning about a new league. I think that's a real privilege to be there watching Anderson take these steps.
Patrick, thanks very much. Sean from Ronnie in Edinburgh, do you not know that Marcus Beasley is out injured for at least 3 months with knee ligament damage?
No, most definitely I do know that. I thought the question, though, was to the overall standing of DeMarcus Beasley. Now, in terms of the injury situation, just again because of the niche nature, and I hate to say that, but it's true, of Major League Soccer, of football in general in the U.S., it's just not a story that's widely reported. I think anybody who follows football certainly is aware of that, and it's a difficult situation. But it's an injury, as I understand it, 2 months, 3 months at maximum. It's not going to affect DeMarcus Beasley as the U.S. goes into the World Cup qualification campaign. Overall, his standing is very, very high. He's the type of footballer, he's not certainly broken out into the pop culture sphere the way that David Beckham has, or maybe even Landon Donovan of LA Galaxy a little bit, but people who aren't that familiar with football, with the U.S. in the World Cup, still know DeMarcus Beasley. By the way, Dotun, I do want to try to get my 0.5 rating up a little bit. Greg Dalby is at Charleroi in Belgium right now, the footballer that I had the question about, who nearly signed for Preston North End, so now in Belgian football. So I'm probably up to 0.8 now.
Or 7.5. Anyway, Ian in Wainstones in Middlesbrough, good morning.
Yeah, hi. Hello, everybody. I was just wondering if anyone thinks that Venezuela might finally break the duck and qualify for the next World Cup finals.
Well, they're fifth at the moment after 4 rounds of World Cup qualification. They're in fifth place. If they retain that position, they will qualify for the playoff against the team that finishes fourth in Sean's region, the CONCACAF region. How have they celebrated reaching fifth place? Their coach has just resigned. A shock decision. Richard Payes, the coach, who's been the coach since 2001 and has taken them to unprecedented heights. The pressure just got to him, the pressure of the expectations and so on. They had a very, very dramatic last game, a really, really dramatic game against Bolivia, where 3 times they were losing.
They won in the end, didn't they?
That's right, yeah. And then the Bolivia defence just went absent without leave in the last 10 minutes. Venezuela scored 3 times in the last 10 minutes to win 5-3. So it was a pressure game, and during that game, the crowd were getting on, were catcalling and getting on top of the coach, getting on top of Richard Páez, and Páez's son is a fixture in the team. Ricardo David Páez is a left-footed midfielder,
right.
And so he was a target for the Boo Boys as well. He's been in the role, as I say now, for it's more than 6 years. And there's a famous phrase by the Italian coach, Giovanni Trapattoni. When he resigned one of his positions, he said, when coaches stay around for a while, they start to smell. And I think that's what perhaps happened to Páez. Although over these 6 years, he's taken Venezuela to unprecedented heights, that means that the expectations have risen with it.
Yeah.
So from the perspective of 10 years ago, for Venezuela to be fifth in the continent was unbelievable. It was an absolute pipe dream. There's no way it could happen. But from the perspective of now, the Venezuelan public are not particularly happy. They want more. They're tired of this particular coach. They want a new coach. So I suppose luckily for them, the next rounds of the World Cup qualification program are not until June. So they've got plenty of time to get a new coach in. But if you ask for my kind of prediction about whether they're going to do it this time, I would be very surprised. I think that there's 4.5 places. The top 4 go through automatically.
Yeah.
The side that comes fifth will go to the playoff. Now, Brazil and Argentina will certainly come in that top 2. Paraguay are looking very strong, Colombia as well, and I also think there'll be stiff competition from both Uruguay and Chile, and maybe Ecuador perhaps as well. So I can't see it quite yet, Venezuela qualifying for the World Cup, although they are making dramatic strides. And from the perspective of 10 years ago, they've come on in leaps and bounds.
Yeah.
Ian, thanks a lot for that. Appreciate it. By email, Sean from Ben. Hi guys, this is my favourite show on internet radio. Question for Sean, please. Can you tell me if Vancouver is ever going to get a Major League Soccer team, and if it's a good thing that Seattle have a new Major League Soccer team? That's from Ben having a beer on a cold winter's night in Vancouver, BC.
Vancouver is the prettiest city in North America, without question. Anybody who's anywhere close to Vancouver, drive there. It is just a stunning, stunning city. I would love, selfishly, for Vancouver to be Major League Soccer so I can get a couple of trips there a year during the football season as a commentator. It comes down to stadium, 100%. Now, the person who owns the second division side, the Vancouver Whitecaps, has purchased land along the waterfront, and he wants to develop a stadium, which would be close to 20,000. It would serve as almost a second national stadium. The National Football Stadium, being BMO Field in Toronto, would be almost the second ground for Canada to play international football, and it would serve as a Major League Soccer ground. There's a lot, as I understand it, of governmental issues, red tape, as we say in the United States and as they say in Canada as well, that they're trying to go into this land, even though it's being privately constructed, privately owned, this new football ground, still with the government giving all of the correct zoning permits and allowing that construction to begin. If and when that happens, Vancouver is a lock. It's 100% guaranteed they're in Major League Soccer. I think a realistic timetable, they would probably be in the league 2010, 2011. Now, in terms of Seattle, Seattle will be coming into Major League Soccer in 2009. One of the owners of that club is the comedian, the actor Drew Carey. Another owner is the Hollywood studio executive Joe Roth. Seattle is another stellar city. It is also just a beautiful city. That's a really wonderful part of North America, that Pacific Northwest corridor. The only thing that I find troubling about Seattle is that they will be playing at a American football venue, Quest Stadium, where I've actually done television matches for their second division side. In 2005, I did the championship match for American television of the second division. They had 5,000 people in the ground, which sounds all right until I tell you it's a 66,000 seat ground. Now, they may draw 20 or 25,000 optimistically for Major League Soccer fixtures for the new Seattle MLS club, but that's still a lot of empty seats. The trend in Major League Soccer, like they're talking about in Vancouver, go into cities where they are building football-specific grounds called soccer-specific stadiums in the U.S. and Canada. That's not the case in Seattle. Major League Soccer wanted to go to Seattle. It's an attractive city. It's in an interesting part of the country. It's a vibrant city. They love their sport, but that's the only negative issue as I see it, is that they're playing in an NFL stadium.
Okay, thanks a lot for that. Tony in London, good morning.
Good morning. Hi. Just talking to Tim earlier, or listening to Tim earlier, and he was worried about Brazil and their stadium for the World Cup. I've just come back from South Africa, and I was in Soweto, and the two stadiums that they're building there look fantastic at the moment, as far as Soccer City is concerned, and the Orlando Pirates' new stadium. So I would say to Tim, hold on, because of all the stories that are happening about South Africa, about the violence and all that. I just saw progress, and you never know, Brazil could pull it off in 2014. I'm just saying, keep your head up, and it might happen despite all the problems.
It's a really positive message.
I'm sure, Tony, that Brazil can do a World Cup. No doubt about it whatsoever. My question mark a little bit is about the legacy. What kind of World Cup, and especially what kind of legacy will there be for Brazilian society? And it looks as though the final of the 2014 World Cup is going to be here in Rio, in the Maracanã. Now, the Maracanã was built for the 50 World Cup, and it's obsolete. I mean, it's a wonderful stadium. I love it. I've been there, I don't know how many, it must be 1,000 times. I've been to the place. I love the place, but it's outdated. An English architect called Barry Lowe, who was involved in both the new Wembley and the Emirates Stadium, he had a look at it recently, just a couple of months ago, and he took a look and said, it can't do it. It can't do a World Cup match, and it should be dynamited and rebuilt. And I agree with him. There are only two big exits, so there's always a danger of a crush on the way out. And there are, I think, other technical problems, which also the fans are so far away from the pitch, which is an outdated conception in football stadiums these days. But it's going to be rebuilt. It's going to be kind of redone with the existing structure, as I understand it. So I've no doubt that Brazil can do it. But I just wonder if they're going to go far enough, if they're really going to take, because they're never going to get a better opportunity to bring their stadiums up to scratch. I think it's a little bit strange, just to start with, that they're only talking about a maximum of 4 new stadiums. That's 4 from the 18 cities which are currently in the hat. That'll be reduced to 12. So that will probably go down to either 3 or 2 new stadiums. When on Portugal, for Euro 2006, Portugal managed to build 6 new stadiums for Euro 2006. So for Euro 2004. So that worries me a little bit. So I just have that question mark in my mind that I think Brazil perhaps could do better. I think it's up to the Brazilian media and the Brazilian society to press for as much as possible to make sure that the legacy of the 2014 World Cup is as positive as possible.
Yeah, Tony, thanks for the positive call as well. A point for Sean. This is by email from Willie down under. A point for Sean if he's on this week. Beckham mania has been gripping Sydney all week with the showpiece exhibition match between Sydney FC and LA Galaxy on Tuesday night at a sellout Telstra Stadium. Over 80,000 were there for a feast of football. It all went wrong as Beckham's teammates were shown up as very average. Joe Cannon and Steve Cronin, their 2 goalkeepers, were very, very poor. And central defender Kevin Hamsey is by far and away the worst player I've ever seen, and I include Northern Irish Amateur League in that.
Kevin Harms is a Canadian international. Wow.
Okay, he did 2 things in the entire game of note. The first got him booked, and the second saw him trod on a Sydney attacker's wrist and get sent off. A truly awful player. Landon Donovan showed flashes of class, while Clint Mathis was disappointing and the size of a house. Aside from Beckham's all-action display, an excellent free kick just before half-time, there was very little on display to prove that Major League Soccer is any use. Ruud Gullit certainly has his work cut out if the Galaxy are ever to make the playoffs again in this tenure. Maybe the only bright note was Carlos Pavon, a Honduran forward who showed bits of skill. Game finish 5-3 to Sydney, but it wasn't a great advert for the Major League Soccer. Is there any word of Gullit recruiting players? I think I could do a job at the moment, and I've got a broken foot.
Now, that's some very astute comments. I know that all the Americans listening to this program, both in the UK and abroad of bbc.co.uk, are kind of nodding in a knowing fashion about your comments on Clint Dempsey. I would say that's very, very astute. Keep in mind a few things about this fixture. One is that it was a tremendous advertisement for Major League Soccer, as the comments were just referring 80,000 people in Sydney for a friendly. Now, this is the close season for Major League Soccer. Also, Los Angeles Galaxy did not even finish in the top 8. They did not make the playoff zone. It is what it is. Joe Cannon's actually not a bad goalkeeper. He's one of the better ones. He's not in the international picture, but he's one of the better ones in Major League Soccer. He was actually in French football in Ligue 1 at Lens. Joe Cannon, though, again, it's his off-season. Steve Cronin, a second-choice goalkeeper. As you see in any friendly match, including, let's go back to July when Chelsea defeated LA Galaxy by a 1-0 scoreline. Does anybody in the world think that Chelsea is only 1-0 better than Los Angeles Galaxy? It's a friendly. The one comment that was missed, though, was that David Beckham scored on a free kick. So I think everyone in Australia got exactly what they wanted, which was a Sydney FC victory, and they saw a David Beckham goal. 5-3 was the fixture on that. Now, the Beckham train has then moved into New Zealand. They had 15,000, that's correct, 15,000 for training for Los Angeles Galaxy, mainly school children in Wellington, New Zealand. Wellington Phoenix FC are a New Zealand side, but they play in Australia's A-League. So later on today, LA Galaxy will be away to Wellington Phoenix FC. The ground will be sold out at 34,500. This will set a record for a football crowd in New Zealand. In the history of the nation, this will be the biggest crowd ever for Los Angeles Galaxy, but of course it's not for Los Angeles Galaxy, it's to see David Beckham. This is wonderful, wonderful attention for Major League Soccer. This is exactly what the league envisioned when they signed David Beckham to the contract.
Imran in Leeds and Sean in Oxford. I'll bring you up both at the same time because you're both interested in the same player. Imran in Leeds, you go first.
Yeah, good morning, Dotun. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks very much.
Yeah, Dotun, my question was to Tim. I know Riquelme has gone back home, but, how close was, or how much of an interest did Tottenham show?
Okay. Sean in Oxford, do you want to ask your question too?
Yes, although I had a different question as well as the Riquelme one.
Go ahead.
Basically, the question with regard to Riquelme was, is he overrated? And I say that because I think in his career what you see is a load of individual rewards, but you don't see him having won things with teams. And he's perhaps, whenever a team has sort of built their side around him, they've come a cropper in the end. I think we saw that last year at the World Cup as an example. But they're too slow and they're too sort of, it's wonderful to watch, but it sort of doesn't quite work, basically. Well, I have a second question, but if Tim can go ahead anyway.
Yeah, go on ahead with your second question as well. Throw that in.
Yeah, the second question is about Uruguay. I was reading the other week that the association have made the ticket prices for World Cup qualifiers ridiculous, and that's meant the stadium is not full. I was watching the highlights of Uruguay against Chile a couple of weeks ago, and that stadium, the Centenario, was definitely not full, and that's going to kill Uruguay's qualifying hopes, isn't it?
Tim.
Yeah, it seems to be very short-sighted what Uruguay are doing with that. But they dropped 2 home points there. They drew with Chile at home, yep. So they could perhaps have done with a few more supporters there to cheer them home. And I remember that they messed up their flight to Australia for the playoff last time. They were eliminated by Australia in the playoff on penalties. Australia had their own plane and all went back relaxed. And Uruguay, they couldn't get all of their players onto first class. So some of them were in economy class. It's a long flight. And they tried to kind of swap it round. They had to have players in economy and some in first class and whatever, which was a very, very short-sighted thing for them not to have sorted out their financial arrangements. So perhaps it's a case of lions being led by lambs, as the film has it. On Riquelme, well, I've got a certain sympathy for some of your comments, but I look at the Copa Libertadores this year, and he was remarkable, and he led Boca to that triumph. He's won other Libertadores with Boca, and it's a difficult competition to win the Libertadores. And he's got some titles to his name with that one. Also Villarreal, I know he missed that penalty against Arsenal, but to carry Villarreal, and he was the principal player at that time, and to carry them to a tiny little Spanish club with no tradition whatsoever beforehand, to carry them to the gate of the Champions League final was an absolutely remarkable achievement. So I think perhaps a little bit harsh. With Imran's question on Spurs, and I don't think it really mattered, whoever wanted him and however much they wanted to pay him. I mean, last year Alex Ferguson was trying to talk to him to get into Manchester United. He just wanted to go home. He wanted to go to Boca Juniors. He's made his money, and part of the problems with this negotiation that they've had in order for Boca to get him was the tax that he'd have to pay to the Spanish government and so on. So there seems to have come to some kind of settlement on that. But so he's made his money there. He's been in Europe, since 2002. So that's he's built up a nice little nest egg for himself. He'll still be earning good money in Argentina, and he just wanted to go home. And living abroad isn't for everyone. It's not perhaps something that English players have to face too often these days. But there was a fantastic phrase by the great Hugh McIlvanney, the football journalist, who said that at that time in the 80s, where English footballers were going to Italy, he was saying that lots of them were playing as if they had their return ticket tucked into their sock, which I think was just a fantastic line for how the English players found it hard to adapt. So Michael Owen, in his spell at Real Madrid, he said that he missed English people and he even missed English weather. Living abroad just isn't for everyone. And Riquelme, he's been abroad for a while. He just wanted to go back. So I think anyone could have come knocking at his door. He wanted to be with Boca Juniors.
Thanks very much for that call, both to Sean in Oxford and to Imran as well. Willie in Sydney, I've just been reading out your email. You don't, and you're in Sydney, Australia, I should add. You don't think much
That's
of
right.
Major League Soccer?
Yeah, a bit disappointed, to tell you the truth, Dotun. Pleasure to speak to you. They were ill here on Tuesday night for the LA Galaxy Sydney FC match. It was a bit of an exhibition, and actually some of the press, I think, were quite scathing and a bit quite cynical about the whole thing. It was a bit of a publicity PR exercise for Beckham to come over and sell a few bottles of aftershave and walk around the city with his Adidas gear on. He's got enormous press coverage over here with the TV companies following him about with his 3 stripes on, and they were setting PR stunts like he took a free kick from across Darling Harbour into a goal on the other side of the pavement, the other side of the port. Stuff like that. But the football, actually, he was played very, very deep almost in front of the back 4. I think the defending was very, very disappointing from being raised with a bit of European football, being spoiled a bit.
Well, Willie, you don't have to tell me. You don't have to tell me that. You can tell Sean directly, because he doesn't agree with you on the quality of Major League Soccer down there.
No,
yes,
Willie.
John,
all I would go ahead, Willie. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, all I would say to you is. It's the lines from the U.S.
I tell you what, Sean first and then Willie.
Forgive me, Willie. I'm not rude. It's just the delay on your line. Forgive me. I would say that Major League Soccer straight up club for club matches up very, very well with the Australian, the Hyundai A-League. Again, Los Angeles Galaxy did not finish in the playoff zone, which means they were not one of the 8 clubs. They were not a very good side this year, with or without David Beckham. Also, this is the closed season. This is a friendly. This is not a meaningful match for Los Angeles Galaxy. And you're right, this is a publicity exercise. This is for David Beckham. This is for Adidas. This is for Major League Soccer. It's not serious football. If you took the elite 2 or 3 sides in the A-League and the elite 2 or 3 sides in Major League Soccer, I think you would see them match up very well. And I would say that a club like Houston Dynamo might even be as good or better than any club in Australia's A-League. I think they're 2 very evenly matched leagues. But let's just take this for what it is. Though I was very impressed, though, of your comments on Clint Mathis. I think that's very astute. And I thought you were a little harsh on Kevin Harms. He is a first-choice Canadian international, but it sounds like he had a shocker. We didn't get to see the match here in the States.
Yes, I was disappointed in Harms. One in particular, he was one of the players you'd mentioned in previous podcasts. He really did 2 things in the whole game. The first was to hack down Juninho, who's just returned from injury. That was his comeback game, really, where he lasted about half an hour before having to be replaced, after he was 5-2 nearly by Harmsy. And then in the second half, when young, I think his name is Bidden, had come on, right winger for Sydney FC. He's a player I haven't seen before. He came on and ran them ragged down the left-hand side. They moved Kevin Harmsy across, and he cut the guy in 2, pushed him over, and then quite deliberately stood on his wrist. So he got his marching orders for that. But it was very disappointing, actually, not dealing with the pace of the game and having to resort to tactics like that in the defence. But also the 2 goalkeepers that Galaxy used were quite disappointing and let some easy shots in. But all in all, it was a full house, 80,000 people in the Telstra Arena, the one they used for the Olympics in Sydney. And non-football fans here, I think, seemed to jump on the bandwagon, and it did very well in the ratings and seemed to be a success for David Beckham and his brand.
Well, if I may ask you quickly, I know we're coming up to news and sport. If Los Angeles Galaxy had made this trip a year ago without David Beckham, instead of 80,000 tickets, how many tickets would they have sold?
Well, I would say the average gate for Sydney FC normal league game in the A-League would be, I would say, 20,000. I'd say they struggled to sell half of that for an exhibition game. But it was good seeing Landon Donovan, even though he's this is your off-season, and Clint Mathis with his touches there. But it was interesting seeing them in their. Some of the Sydney FC players who wouldn't be on the Socceroos. Actually, it would be a disappointing comparison to some of the MLS players. But man for man, I thought I was quite disappointed what I saw. But I think Ridholt's got his work cut out in the coming months for the next season.
And Sean, let's not forget the Major League Soccer employed David Beckham to sell the MLS brand worldwide. And it seems as if David Beckham is using the MLS to sell his brand worldwide. That should be worrying.
No, that's exactly right. It's all interdependent. And Willie, even though I'm a bit of a defender for Major League Soccer, I can't disagree with anything you're saying. And the reality of it is that Los Angeles Galaxy is not a very good side. They played some really awful football at times during the past Major League Soccer campaign and in a friendly in the off-season after a very long plane flight. I think giving up 5 goals sounds very Galaxy-esque.
You've been listening to a download of the World Football Phone-In from Up All Night at BBC Radio 5 Live. You can put your questions live on Saturday mornings from 2:30am to 4am, or you can email us at upallnight, that's all one word, at bbc.co.uk. That's upallnight at bbc.co.uk.